Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I got to tell you, I'm really excited for this next panelist to come on board. Rodney Barnes is a television writer, producer. He's worked on the Boondocks. He's worked on Marvel's Runaways. He's worked on American Gods. He worked on one of the best miniseries of last year, Wu-Tang. I love that. I mean, come on, you got to love that. And he is the creator, the impresario, the man behind Killadelphia, which perhaps might be one of the greatest comic book titles ever in comic history. Jason Shawn Alexander is the writer, and the letterer, which cracks me up, is Marshall Dillon. I can't wait to talk to him all about this. Please welcome Rodney Barnes.
Rodney, hey, how's it going?
It is a huge pleasure and a great honor to meet you, sir. We've never met, but man, do I love Killadelphia.
Thank you very much. I love your shirt, and I love all of your figures behind you.
Oh, well, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I've got the seven samurai. Actually, the Wu-Tang Clan would like this. All seven samurai are behind me, and also Lone Wolf and Cub. They're a fan of Shogun Assassin as well. So
nice.
That figures it. But thank you for that.
I see your phaser. I see a phaser over there. I see a few things.
Yeah, the Master Replicas phaser. When that's actually the Shatner signed edition.
Oh, but see, there you go.
You know,
that's the only way to get it.
Absolutely, because you have to have the autographed version.
This is true.
Now I gotta ask you something, because I watched your I love John Suntress's Word Balloon podcast. And before, in sort of preparation for this interview with you, I watched the piece you did with him, the interview, I guess just a couple of days ago. And you said something that really cracked me up. And you said, if you could go back and talk to like your younger self, like your 8-year-old self, and say, listen, you know, you're going to be writing comic books one day, but it's really hard, you know, and how tough it is. I mean, you're working on all this cool stuff. Is that true? I mean, when you were a kid, could you have ever envisioned where you are now? I mean, I know you went to Howard University and you really worked your way up, and as a TV producer, you've had to deal with that nightmare, you know, of this. What is the second season of American Gods?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was tough. That was a tough one. Yeah.
I mean, that was a tough one, you know, and coming in and doing that, and at the same time, you're writing all kinds of crazy comics. I mean, Lando Calrissian, you know, you can you get to work for Disney in addition to everything else. So even though you would have told your younger self how hard it is, it seems to me you have to be having a good time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a relative good time. It's one of those things where, you know, as I was saying before, you hear the word no a lot. You know, we're having this conversation because of the times that I've heard the word yes and things have worked out.
Right.
But I hear the word no a lot. And so emotionally, you have to be able to accept that. And oftentimes you have to do things that you don't want to do to get to where you want to be. And sometimes that's unsettling as well. It's like I was cultured to a life of a regular 9-to-5 gig, and those sensibilities to lesser greater degrees still sort of remain. You know, so it's a lot of work. I have a difficult time saying no.
Right.
But that said, I'm grateful. I'm blessed. I do enjoy what I do when I get an opportunity to just do that. But oftentimes as a producer and a writer, you have to wear a lot of different hats. You have to be your own hype man. You have to be your own manager. You have to be your own disciplinarian oftentimes.
Sure.
To prioritize what you're going to do first. If you do a number of things, how you're going to make all of that stuff work. And I'm not really as disciplined as I need to be, or as I should be. So, you know, there are times when my therapist says it's oppositional defiance syndrome. Like sometimes I just wake up and I say, I don't want to work. I don't feel like doing this today. And I sit in that for like an hour or two, maybe, and then I get up and I do the work. And so, you know, it's not as romantic as I thought it would be. You know,
right.
I think that's the thing. I thought that it would be, you wake up every morning, you go down by the ocean, and you sit there and you just dream and you write your stories, and then a bottle of wine and some cheese, and it's wonderful. And more often than not, it's people yelling at you for "Where's my thing?" or it's difficult wearing a lot of different hats and just juggling a lot of different things. And you just have to be able to suck it up and take it when it's not what you want it to be, if that makes sense.
No, look, I come from the entertainment business myself, and I'm eking out a meager living as an independent filmmaker myself, producer and editor. And I totally agree with everything you said. Now I'm curious. I mean, now that I have you in the hot seat, how did you go from coming out of college? How did you get into writing, both in terms of comics and in terms of television production? Because you've worked on some really cool stuff, and especially, like I said, the Wu-Tang Clan, the I guess what you call it, the docu-series, because it was so first of all, what a cool thing, and working on things like Boondocks, which I always love the comic strip, and then to see it make that transition. What was sort of your journey to becoming a writer producer in Hollywood, and then also working in comics?
I used to be a production assistant and an assistant director in the Washington, Maryland, DC area. Worked on Clear and Present Danger and The Pelican Brief and a bunch of
really?
a bunch of movies.
Man, I love Clear. I can watch that movie over and over again.
Yeah, it's a good movie. I mean, I was fortunate to oftentimes companies will do their glamour shots in DC, like if it's a political movie, and they'll do the other stuff someplace else. So I was fortunate enough to work on a lot of really good movies early on, just to get psychologically. There's a math to making movies. It's the way the way that it all comes together, the way a team assembles a thing. And eventually, I worked on a movie, Major Payne, where I met Damon Wayans.
Yeah.
And we hit it off, and he asked me what I wanted to do with my career, and I told him I wanted to be a writer. And so for the next couple of years, I followed him around the country, sleeping in my car, working on his movies, working with him. And eventually I worked on a movie, Bulletproof, with him and Adam Sandler. I'm actually in that movie for a scene. I'm about to rape Adam Sandler in prison, and Damon saves him. And Damon and I had a heart-to-heart talk about if you really want to be a professional writer, you got to come to Hollywood. I was commuting at the time from Maryland to California.
That's a long drive.
Oh, in 3 days. I could do it in 3 days if I didn't sleep. And which is kind of dangerous, and I wouldn't advise anybody to do it, but I did it at the time. And this was the early 90s, I believe. And eventually I came to California, and I started, just first thing to do was survive. My first job was on the movie Blade. I was a production assistant on Blade.
Wow.
And I was a stand-in for Michael Clark Duncan on the movie The Green Mile. And I did a whole bunch of stuff. And eventually I just buckled down, and I really learned my craft and just did a lot of work. And eventually Damon and I reconnected. And he said, I have this show, My Wife and Kids. Would you like to come in for a day to be a punch-up writer? And just basically sending jokes in. And I did it, and I just kept coming back for free. And until they eventually gave me a job as a staff writer. And that was sort of the beginning. There's a lot more in between, but that was my first WGA Guild job that got me in.
How important do you think having someone like Damon Wayans in your corner? Everyone talks about Hollywood. It's not what you know, or it's not who you know. It's not what you know. It's who you know. And even though you had a Hollywood relationship with somebody, you still sounded like you busted your ass before you even. You needed both. You have to have that work ethic, and like you said, you took those jobs and did all that other stuff. And so when you reconnected, you had a background to say, look, I've been doing this.
Nobody's going to carry you. Nobody's going to give you anything. Even if you have one opportunity, you could just flame out right there, get one job, and that could be the only job that you ever have. I think for me, even to this day, I've never been comfortable with just having one thing to do. And that's why if you look at my IMDb page, there's a lot going on because I've never been settled in. Working in Hollywood is like working in the circus. You're going to move to another town eventually. You're going to keep moving and moving and moving. And so for me, it was like, how can I keep multiple revenue streams coming? Because that fear that one day this is all going to go away and I'm going to go away with it was omnipresent. So I always had, whether it was working on movies, doing commercials, short form storytelling, graphic novels, whatever it was, I was going to figure out another way to make it work. But you asked me another part of a question that I didn't answer. When I was working on the show Runaways for Marvel, I made it clear that I really love comic books. And if there was ever a slot open, to please consider me. And they gave me Falcon. And I sort of have a love, not necessarily love-like, there is no hate, love-like relationship with that book because it was my first book. And when I go back now, all I see are the mistakes that I made along the way. And fortunately for comic book writers of today's world, we have Twitter, which tells you immediately what those mistakes are. And so
yes, it does.
I don't know if the guys in the 70s and 80s and, when I first started reading comics had that same dynamic. They had a letters page.
They had the letters of comment, that lock page,
Yeah, but they could pick which letters they were going to publish to put in. They didn't immediately get, I hate you, immediately, fired off. But, a lot of my early criticism actually helped because, you overwrite, you underwrite, you do a lot of things here and there. And the fortunate thing about writing in comics was I got opportunities to continue to get better. And you only get better at doing something by continuously doing the thing. That's the only way you can, sharpen the tools. So, so there you go. Even the criticism in and of itself helps indoctrinate you into the world of, can I take this or not? And, and there you go.
Now, did you, as a writer, obviously moving into the comic realm, a lot of what you're doing is working with your artist. And that, I would imagine, is a skill set that one has to develop. So when you first started working with your artist on Falcon, was it difficult for you or not? And what was tell us a little bit about the writer-artist relationship as far as you see it.
Joshua Cassara was the artist on Falcon, and he's an incredible human being. I love you, Josh, if you're watching this. To this day, we still keep in touch, and I hope we get to work together again at some point. Josh knew a lot more about the world than I did at the time. And, the whole thing with the relationship between words and images and what to write, what not to write, some of dialogue was, I was writing sitcom jokes for, something that you would actually need to hear more so than read.
Right.
And, I remember the first note I got back from Marvel was, it's so many words, it's ponderous. And it was almost like, and when I got the art back, which is the most exciting part of it, it's like you almost had to move the words out of the way to get to the art because there was so many of them. Because I was writing a book in my mind.
Right.
And so I had to learn to, how to say a lot with a little, how to make a relationship with the art. And Josh was great with that. It's like, I honestly look at issue 4 as my first book, because the first 3, I was kind of just like shooting in the dark. And by issue 4, I knew exactly the story I wanted to tell. I was starting to develop some of the skill set that I think has served me in other projects that I've worked on past then. And so, it's different than with Jason and I in Philadelphia because we're friends and we live a mile away from each other. But, with Josh, it was, He was my drill instructor. If you've ever seen any like Vietnam movie, Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal
or any of
Jacket.
those, yeah, it's like he was that. I was the other guy. I forget the guy's name. The crazy one that ends up shooting himself.
Private Pile.
Yeah, him. I was, and
Pile.
he was the sergeant, and so he helped me. He was a lot nicer about it, and obviously I'm still here, so I didn't shoot myself. But Josh was really, really good with helping me turn a corner. Eternally grateful.
Well, it brings us to Killadelphia, which I think it debuted almost a year ago, last November.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And I have to say that one of the great things, and Image Comics publishes it. Mm-hmm. And first of all, did you approach Image with this? Tell us where did the idea come from? What were some of the influences on Killadelphia? Where did you? Because I have a lot I want to ask you about, but I'm curious about where it all came from.
Oh, okay. Killadelphia came from one of the first movies I remember as a kid seeing was Blackula, and it had a profound effect on me.
With William Marshall.
Yes, very good. Yes, William Marshall had a profound.
He was in a Star Trek episode too. He played Dr.
Yes, he was.
Building on my work.
We could be friends. We remember the same stuff. And he was also on Pee-wee's Playhouse, I believe, as well.
Yes, he was.
And so it was a double feature. It was Blackula and Scream, Blackula, Scream.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they had a profound. It was like things kind of crashed together around the same time. There was Kolchak the Night Stalker, the Richard Matheson movies of the week. The
Night Strangler too.
Night Strangler, Night Stalker.
I'm from Seattle, so
okay, there you go. And it was the underground, and he was walking around. Yeah. So there was that, and there was Salem's Lot, Stephen King's. I remember reaching up, and I'm like 6'7" now, so reaching up. That's how young I was on the little spinner when they had the paperback spinners. And I remember in the early Stephen King books, they would have all of the publisher reviews in the beginning, like 4 pages of publisher reviews about how great the book was. So I read it because everybody said it was great. So
that silver and black cover with the blank face.
There you go. And so I read that. I was into Famous Monsters, the magazine. I had the models, the glow-in-the-dark ones that you had.
You and I had the same childhood.
Yeah. And so it was all of that. It was the creature features with the Universal monsters that would come on Saturday night at 11 o'clock. And so I was just indoctrinated into this world, but I didn't see a whole lot of vampires that came from like my culture. Like there was just mostly the same kinds of stuff. And
where'd you grow up?
Annapolis, Maryland, not too far from Baltimore, Maryland.
All right.
Went to senior in high school. I went to Northwestern High School in Baltimore as well. And I just remember, what would that look like? And even as a kid, before I made a decision to become a writer, I always was like, what story would I tell if I had an opportunity to tell a story? And so when I got to Hollywood, I had a version of what Killadelphia ultimately became that I rolled around and tried to sell it as a TV show, tried to sell it as a movie. No one would bite, no pun intended. And so Jason and I ended up interviewing Jason Shawn Alexander for this art book. And we didn't know each other, but we sort of stayed connected and stayed friends because we lived so close to each other. So invariably, when you're a writer and you're friends with an artist and you both love comic books, you pitch each other. And he would pitch ideas that I hated, and I would pitch ideas that he hated. And this was like the routine for a couple of years. Like we just hated each other's pitches. And so one day, and he had been drinking at this dinner, I pitched him Killadelphia. He said, "Ooh, I like that." And
was it called that then?
It was called Killadelphia at that point.
Because I can't tell you how much I love that title.
Thank you. There's 70-30 love to not love to the title, but I pitched it to him and he said, "Man, I really like that." And I'm wondering is it because he's been drinking? or does he really like it? Because Jason is mercurial in that way. You never know. You never know. You know, he could be just nice because I'm paying for the dinner. So he could be just being a nice guy. So the next day or maybe the day after, he calls and he says, that thing, that Philadelphia thing that you were pitching me, have you written it down? And I said, well, in different forms, but not exactly what I pitched you. He said, I think we could do something with that. So with that encouragement, I put together a pitch document and we took it to a couple of places and they didn't really understand it. And because it's a lot of different layers. There's a president, there's this father-son thing, there's this guy walking around. It's a bunch of different things happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So eventually, because Jason was working on Spawn at Image, he took it to the powers that be at Image. And so they said yes. And that was sort of kind of it. I always knew what the first issue was, and I knew what the second issue was. And the rest was kind of like a blur. I had an idea of what I wanted it to be and what I wanted it to feel like. So there you go.
Well, what I really love about the book, and in a way, maybe I don't know if some of it came from your experience in Blade. I really love when the supernatural and all the way back to Kolchak, the Night Stalker. Mm-hmm. I love when the supernatural is set in a city. Where the city becomes, and I'm always banging on about verisimilitude, keeping things real. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about Stephen King was back in the day, when you're even watching Hammer horror films and famous monsters, horror was always like in the mountains of Carpathia somewhere.
Yes.
The Karnstein vampire trilogy. But then things started to change. Horror came down from the mountains and came into the, as Clive Barker would say, to the hills, the cities. And Stephen King really said that, that strange girl that lives down in your cul-de-sac, well, she's really psychic. She has a crazy religious mother, and she's going to kill all of your high school student friends at prom. So horror was brought into the cities. Mm-hmm. And I love, and Kolchak did that. He's a reporter. He's on the beat. He's kind of this, and yet he's always, every supernatural event he would run across. And now we've seen, I mean, that's the thing about Philadelphia is as much about the American city and the experience of the inner city and what's going on in terms of everything from politics to poverty to it touches on everything, kind of like, in a way, The Wire. I mean, talk about from Baltimore. I mean, I'm a huge fan of The Wire, and it's not that it's the same thing at all, but it, like the original Candyman that was set in Cabrini Green, in Chicago. I really liked the milieu that you set the story in. And was that always the intention, or?
Well, first, I got to compliment you on liking the same things that I like. It's the same thing with that
and all of that.
Yeah, with the Hammer films, and they would be in carriages like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, and they'd be in the woods,
right.
And like Salem's Lot was sort of Peyton Place in a small town, but it wasn't the city, it wasn't concrete.
No.
And there was this weird thing that happened when I worked on Blade, where when you're the lowest paid person, they leave you outside to watch things. Like you become like the security guard. You have to wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah, I was a PA on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
There you go. So So we would be like under the 6th Street Bridge or in LA. And if you know what that's like, it's closer to Dawn of the Dead because, yes. People come out and just skitter around in the middle of the night. And I'm like, this is terrifying. I'm not built for this. But when you have any sort of imagination and you love horror and you're watching this thing play out, and then the backdrop of just like people moving in the darkness and just moving around, you got these huge skyscrapers and buildings behind you. And then there's a certain architecture that's there too. And back to Kolchak, there was a feeling about him skulking around alleys and, when he was chasing the vampire down, that just felt like I know this. I don't know the Hammer experience. I don't know the Bangor, Maine experience. I don't know that experience. I love it, but I think being able to. This is another thing too. Something that I learned about Falcon and some of the other things that I've written that didn't come out exactly how I wanted to. You need, in my opinion, my better work is when I put myself into it, and not when I'm just doing it like, oh my God, I get to write a comic book. This is incredible, and I'm writing from that place. But when I'm getting into the character and the story that I'm trying to tell from my own personal feelings, there's something about being able to connect your head and your heart to the thing that you love that I think translates into the document and the thing that you're doing.
Sure.
And that's what this was for me. I know what the city is like, whether it's Baltimore, whether it's Philadelphia, whether it's New York. I've lived in all of those places. I've been there. I've been broke in those cities. So it's not like, I've wandered around with no money in my pocket. So I've had to really be one of the people and not necessarily like elevated in any particular class. And there's a rhythm to every city. There's a language to every city that's that I try to get Philly down to a certain place without forcing it. Not just the vernacular and certain specificities, but to the point where people from Philly can't say that's not Philly.
Right.
So there's that. But with Philadelphia, there's this unique political backdrop, this connection to American history. The Liberty Bell and, documents and buildings and things that are very much a part of what American politics are. And then you have the social stuff that's going on. You have the homicide rate and the crime and all of the things that are happening there as well that almost speak to, there's an irony that's there to the idea of what America is. And then there's a reality of what America is. And you can't, the two are connected together. And
Absolutely.
So what happens if in all of that, you drop a vampire in, and a vampire that has a certain amount of pedigree, not just any old bloodsucker who's just out to, drink blood. He actually has like an agenda. And that agenda is a very American agenda that's attached to ego. And, when you add that into power and perspective into the story, I think it changes the math of, being not just the average vampire story.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is, I think it's very apparent from the book itself when you read it. There's so much going on, and I think about things like Blade, the opening scene of Blade, for instance, when they go to the blood rave, when Tracy Lords is
the Blood Club.
dragging.
I'm actually in there.
Are you really?
I'm actually in. It's not as clear as with Bulletproof, but I'm actually in the Blood Club because my job was to bring extras in and make sure that they get bloody, because we had sprinklers that would bring the blood down. And once
I heard it was miserable in there too.
Oh, it was horrible. It was the worst, one of the worst things I've ever experienced in my life. But because the extras, you had model types, and it's like the guys and women were all kind of LA people. And they would tell them that they would get bloody, but they thought it would be like sexy vampire, cool bloody, not drenched from the rafters with syrup and, that kind of bloody. So they would run out, and somebody had to be there to say, no, get back in. You're not bloody enough. The club, it's still going on. Don't you hear the techno music?
Yeah.
And so that was my job. So part of that was I had to be close enough so that they couldn't get out of the room. So I would stand in the doorway. Then eventually someone said, just make him a vampire. Just stay. Don't. And so I had to get bloody too.
Well, it's still, I mean, the idea that you have this consortium of vampires in a city. I mean, I think about other like in LA, John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, which is set in and around a church in downtown LA, and Alice Cooper is like the leader of the possessed homeless people, and there's just something about the sort of decaying underbellies of our cities. And I love the idea that, the collision of American history, what Philadelphia was, it was the promise of what America was going to be. And,
exactly.
200 years later, after our many legacies of of everything, like the fact, I mean, race, and we have so many. Look, we saw it. We saw what happened in early with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter and the protests that have arisen, and people are really looking back. What is it? The 1612 project, or what is it?
1619, I believe.
1619, and then you look back at the idea of, for instance, finding out in Watchmen, they go back to the Black Wall Street massacre in Tulsa,
Yeah.
and then the idea that, you know, when Black American soldiers came back from World War II, they couldn't avail themselves of the GI Bill, you know, which changed.
And how
the
Germans tried to use that with the black soldiers when they would drop the leaflets saying,
yeah, the Nazis. Yeah. There's I just saw a thing on that too, and I read one of those leaflets that they were dropping, and within all of that, you know, this cauldron of, there's never really been racial equality in this country. I mean, we can say there is civil rights and all that, and where we're at now, you've really captured in this horror comic, I think, and what makes it so great is you have a vampire, like you said, with an agenda. He's not just, I've come down to seduce some women and we're going to have a good time. You know,
he's not the Frank Langella.
No, he is not. He's not the sexy vampire, and he's not Reggie Nalder or whatever from Salem's Lot, you know, and he's the Karnstein vampire trilogy, and or even Vampire Circus, which I just watched recently. I mean, this is a vampire he's got something going on, you know.
He does. I think, you know, the idea too, as to when I introduced him, which was in book 3, you know, I tried to, well, he was in book 2 as well, but he had his own stage in book 3.
Yes.
Was because I didn't want it to be just about him. I wanted you to, hopefully, if you enjoy the book, to enjoy the father-son dynamic, to enjoy other aspects of the culture and what the actual problem that Adams would be talking about. I wanted you to meet that before you met him, and before you had a full dose of Adams, because very easily in different hands, it would have been a John Adams book if you liked that idea of having John Adams be your main antagonist. It would have been him from the beginning, and it would have mostly been about him, and everything else would have been secondary. And so I try to spread it around. I try to be a good quarterback and make sure that everybody gets to touch the ball, and that there are a myriad of not just characters, but they all have something to do of substance.
Right. Now, how far, like in your scripting of this, could you take us through, how do you write something like this? I mean, do you, like a lot of screenwriters, work on note cards? Do you create an outline first? What is your process in terms of writing? And you know that you've got multiple storylines converging. How do you approach the actual process of writing?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to that guy, Jason Sean Alexander, that I really don't like. We're the best of friends, and he's a brother, but I don't like him, and I don't mind saying that publicly. And what he does is he does this weird thing of, like, we'll finish book 6 and we'll start the second arc, and he's like, okay, I need to do the cover for book 11. What's it about? And I need to do 12, and then I need to do, and so he's got himself. He's worried about him. He's not worried about me, and it's not a team effort at all. And so what I do is to service all of the questions that he and our editor, Greg Tamburello, have, is I do as an extensive an outline as I can for the entire arc. And so that themes, you get the themes, you get the story. Now it tends to evolve from that document, but the kernel of what is in the outline still remains in that story in some way, shape, or form. If it's a story about Abigail Adams and she's going to be the star of that issue, sometimes it'll evolve to maybe slightly, because I changed something in the book before, that I have to adjust her, but she'll still be the star of that book. I tend to maintain themes, and I really approach it more, in the beginning when I did Falcon, it was more of a plot-driven thing. This is going to happen, that's going to happen, that's going to happen, will be at the end. Now I try to go more from a theme-driven, whether it's forgiveness, whether it's anger, whether it's fear, and more of a theme-driven, character-driven thing, which some people dig, some people don't. You know, if you just read the big two books and you're used to a certain type of storytelling, I could see where it would throw you. But my thing is, you know, if you're at Image and you can do sort of what you want to do, why not try to be as evolved? You know, it's funny. Stephen King had a The Outsider, Richard Price, the
On
HBO
HBO.
version. Yeah, and I loved it. But I could understand why some people would say it's slow. You know, if you don't like that character-driven, methodical pace of storytelling, it's going to bug you. And I try to uptick because it is vampire, so I know I have to have a certain amount of violence that's in the book. But I always want the violence to be connected to the theme. If a character is doing a thing, if a vampire is reacting not just out of a need for blood, but for revenge, for hurt, for despair, whatever. I think I like it all to be kind of tied together so it all feels like it belongs. Like it's not just the cheap moment of needing to be violent for violence sake. It matters in the story. Like it's going to progress the story, either emotionally, sometimes for the plot, but always for the character. Like you know more about this character when you leave this issue than you did going into it. And that's usually
Absolutely.
the goal.
One of our viewers, Tevya Smolka, asks, what's your favorite show or book that you worked on in your career?
I'm going to say American Gods and Television because I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan. I love Miracle Man.
Oh, dude, issue 15, the
yes.
battle.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. Kid Miracle Man gets really upset in issue 15.
Kills a whole lot of people.
Kills a whole lot of people.
Puts their heads on pikes.
Heads on pikes. Kind of like in Bram Stoker's. You like Vlad the Impaler. You got heads everywhere.
Man, you and I really did read the same stuff.
Oh, I'm sure we did. I could reach over and get my Swamp Things, my CGC Swamp Things that I love. But so I really wanted to be able to be coming out of the world of sitcoms. You're sort of pigeonholed sometime as to what you've done, regardless of what it is that you want to do. And, you know, sitcoms weren't really helpful in getting to build a bridge to comic books or the genre or anything else. Sitcoms beget more sitcoms. You know, you can continue to do more and more of that. So Runaways was the first step. American Gods was the second step. So in a practical sense, it sort of validated an opportunity to be able to write about different things or to be considered to write for different things because I was starting to develop a resume in that arena. So American Gods was very helpful. And I love the book. And I love a lot of the actors that were there. It was a difficult shoot. The conditions were difficult. But that said, I'd say that as far as books are concerned, I'd say Philadelphia only because I felt like what I was doing, it was the most confident that I approached a story. Like for Falcon, there was absolutely no confidence. There was only abject fear and boyhood glee. Lando was okay. Now, not only do I have the Marvel fans are going to hate me, but the Star Wars fans may hate me as well. So that's two groups that I have to. But I made it out. I made it through. There was some hate, but there was some love. And so, you know, I need a little love. And I did a book for Oni Press called Quincredible, and I still do Quincredible. And that was an opportunity to do more YA type stuff and not so much the adult stuff. So it was you're working different muscles and you're developing, you know, different ways of approaching story. So anytime you can do that, anytime Lando, Falcon, and Quincredible were three different ways to approach story, which is giving me almost like a boot camp of sorts. The way I look at really sitcoms for my TV and film career, like there's this thing when you come out from school and you're a writer, you sort of look at writing like I can do anything that I want to do. And because there's there's this thing called budgets. You can't do everything that
Darn
you want
it.
to do.
Those
Exactly.
darn it, those budgets.
And so working on sitcoms as well sort of trained my mind to being able to understand that I have to work within the confines of the world that we have to work with. And in film, it's writing to a budget. And now even in television, it's writing to a budget. So in comics, it was more of writing to what is it ultimately that I'm trying to say? Not just in this one issue, but over the course of the entire arc of storytelling. What am I trying to get out? What's my purpose here, other than just trying to write the best comic book that I possibly can? And so it all kind of comes together with, So,
well, I've got Peter Beiser asks, is it tough to write content with an edge when everything in the real world is going crazy right now?
I think yes and no. The yes of it is you have to be sensitive to the reality of the difficult circumstances that we're in as a country and as a world. I don't know if that was the same case 20 years ago. You could probably get away with a lot of stuff that you can't get away with now because I won't say there's more pain, but there's more of a voice to that pain that you have to be cognitive of. Empathy means something different today than I think it meant 30 years ago. I grew up in a very narrow world that I wasn't exposed to a lot of thoughts that weren't just, in quotes, traditional thought. I came from a very traditional blue collar background. And when I was exposed to people who thought in different ways, it made me challenge my own thinking and the things that I believed were true.
Sure.
And it actually helped broaden my horizon somewhat. And so to that, I think it's important to be able to understand the world that we're in right now and understand our demo. All of that stuff matters. That said, when it comes to violence, doing things that are kind of risque, I think the reader, as long as you're not doing it just to be salacious or just doing it for, I just want to be violent. Today is the day I'm going to write the violent book. I think that's the thing that's a little bit more, that's difficult to do. And I've read books where from page 1 to page 20, it's been nothing but violence and blood and guts. And some people dig that type of thing. I try to be a little bit more sensitive to the world that we're in. I try to make it as much entertainment and be thoughtful throughout the process. I'm not saying I always hit the nail on the head, but in the back of my mind, I do try to be empathetic with the world that we're in.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can't do anything but that. That's where we're at now. I'm curious to take a sort of different approach. I was going to ask you, whenever you're dealing with the supernatural, and there have to be rules. You have to set up certain rules. And one of the things I love is vampires there's all kinds of different vampire mythology. You have the overarching idea of what vampires are. Then you have, like in Twilight, vampires could go out in the day, for instance.
They can sparkle too.
They can sparkle. And some of my favorite, like Miriam Blaylock, Catherine Deneuve in The Hunger, and David Bowie. I mean, they would go to hip clubs and pick up hot people
they could always dress well. I don't know what the store was that they went to, but whether it was Underworld or whatever, they all had sexy stuff and the right boots and everything.
Absolutely. And I'm just curious, when you looked at what you wanted vampire mythology to define what vampirism is, did you have touchstones or things that you looked at, or did you want to change up traditional vampire mythology, and what were some of the things that you looked at, and what tell us about your vision of what vampire mythology is? What is Rodney's world of vampires?
I wanted to make intrinsic changes and extrinsic changes. Intrinsically, what affects and what kills a vampire, because that moves around from time to time.
Sure.
I didn't want it to be a cross because I didn't want to elevate one religion over another religion.
That's interesting.
I didn't. And you know, we talk about Kolchak. I have this T-shirt with Kolchak holding the cross out. You know, it's like that classic image. And I was
Yes.
like, would he be the same if you had a Ankh or some other religious symbol? Would the vampire recoil, you know, in some way? So I didn't want to.
All vampires are Catholic, right?
Exactly. I didn't want to elevate one over the other. I never, you know, maybe it was sulfur, but I never really, the garlic thing, you know, I have to wear the garlic necklace. I was like, you know, that wasn't a thing. But I wanted them to be a cross between monsters and thinking. I wanted them to be attached to their humanity in some way. And I wanted them to be kind of, there's a metaphor in there of, even if you have immortality, the things that limited you as a human being will still limit you as a vampire, like that thinking, unless you change your thinking.
I love that.
Even though you have power and you have perspective, you're still kind of beholden to your thought process. That was one thing. And I wanted, while you were in the coffin, to mean something. I wanted the body for a vampire to be like a prison. So your soul and your spirit could travel. Like you could move about the different realms. And it's not tangible. You couldn't bite people and blah, 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 blah. But I wanted vampires to dream, and I wanted them to dream about their regrets of when they were human beings.
Wow.
Because I think as people, a lot of people, I won't say everybody, certainly, but if you're in therapy, as I am, one of the constant themes is your past and past trauma and overcoming past trauma. So as you're laying there for 50 years in a coffin, waiting for someone to open that coffin back up, what are you doing while you're there? You know, so my thing was, if you're in a dream state and you're replaying your past over and over and over again, there are two things that you can do. You can leave in your spirit. You can go to the netherworld and the dark realms, and, you know, you can move about in that way like a ghost of the spirit realm. Or you could kind of replay. And this actually comes up in an issue of Philadelphia at some point. I won't give it away, but where you're replaying your trauma, because just because you're a vampire, just because you suck blood now and you're connected to this dark force, it doesn't mean that your humanity is just kind of jettisoned out and you're just walking around saying blood, 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 blood. Right. I actually make an analogy with one of the characters where I say, you know, when I was a human being, because a lot of the people in the book come from poverty. It's like I hustled for money when I was a human being, and now as a vampire, I'm hustling for blood. And I've never really had an opportunity to live in either state or take advantage of whatever the virtues of being a human being or whatever the virtues are of being a vampire. I never really got an opportunity to take advantage of either. And so I wanted the vampires to be more just thoughtful. I just wanted the process of being a vampire to be more thoughtful. If you look at like from even Bela Lugosi dressed well. And he was sort of kind of a pimp in his own way, too. He sort of kind of had that, and he'd come in women's rooms and come to the window and do something sexy, and a woman would recoil. But she wanted him. She wanted him. And because of whatever, it's like a dude coming through the window, he had a look and he had a thing that he would do. Right. And he would just do that over and over and over again. And it's like it's a lot to go through for blood and just making more vampires. It's like there has to be more purpose to this whole thing of vampirism other than just the idea of just being that thing. It's like if you're a werewolf, okay, that's a curse. There's nothing you can do about it. You can have 3/4 of a great month or 2/3, and then there's going to be a full moon. It's going to mess up everything. And you can chain yourself down, but you're going to wake up, you know, oh my God, what did I do? But with vampires, that's who you are. And I just wanted that to mean more than just being a monster.
I love hearing that, because I have to say, I think everybody in a certain way is attracted to the idea of being a vampire. Like, I want to be a lost boy. I want to sleep all day, party all night, never grow old, never die. Or, yes. I mean, I could think of worse things.
But you have to feed. But
you have to feed. But keeping up with Catherine Deneuve being like David Bowie, I could hang with her. Like for a couple of centuries, that wouldn't be so bad. But I love the idea that if you have this immortality, what are you going to do with it? And I think, like you talk about Blade, the vampire consortium or whatever, the way they're living is, I find that to be attractive. You can be a vampire captain of industry.
Yes.
And there's enough people out there that there's a lot of people that need killing, right? So we'll take some people off the streets, we'll satiate our hunger, and we'll be able to
even near dark, when they're driving around in the van or whatever, it's like
they go into a bar for a drink.
They go in a bar, dusk till dawn. They're hanging out in a dusty place, and it's like all of them. When I just approaching vampires, because everybody, when you say vampires, they go, "Oh my God, not vampires! What new can you do with vampires?" And I was like, "How can I make it have meaning beyond just the idea of what you've seen with vampires, to where we're talking about politics? Like, life doesn't leave because you're different now, because you're in something, because you're a threat to humanity. It doesn't necessarily make you a monster. You are a threat, but it's almost like being on the Serengeti. Does the gazelle judge the cheetah, or does it try to run really fast to get past it? And so if I'm a thoughtful person, for instance, John Adams' book, he has self-esteem issues. He has stuff that's going on within him because he's gotten an up close and personal look at how history has affected the idea of him. Like George Washington is George Washington. He can do no wrong. He chopped cherry tree down. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson. Some of these guys get statues and monuments and they become, iconic. And what about the other guys? What happens if I've got an opportunity to actually be part of the history that I was part of, and I see that I'm sort of a joke to lesser or greater degrees?
Right.
What do I do with that information emotionally? And I've got the power now and the perspective to change the idea of what I was to ultimately what I would like it to be. And since those other guys are dead, I can one up them forever, and I can sort of be the man. Right. And so, if my sensibilities are there, I'm going to try to make America great again by my own definition.
Sure.
And I'm going to take people who are desperate, and I'm going to make them part of, my focus. They're going to jump on my ship and they're going to ride down the river with me. And so I just wanted more purpose to it, because I don't see, if you notice, more often than not, and there are certainly exceptions. American Vampire, I think, is the exception. Big fan of Scott Snyder and other guys that do. And it's been a hell of a lot of great I Am Legend, a lot of great vampire stories told. So I'm not saying this across the board. But oftentimes in pop culture, when you have books or comic books or whatever about vampires, they sort of burn out after a while if they keep regurgitating the same ideas and the same themes, and the same thing that you said when you were like, what's different about your vampires? I remember going to my manager and he said, you got to do something different. He said it in a managerly way, like not giving it a whole lot of thought, but it was just more of, there's no way you're going to sell it just because the vampires are coming from a different perspective. And I'm like, no, that's not it's not just their perspective. It's everything about them. It's like the approach to everything. There's still the common, we need blood in order to survive, but that's just food. And that's a threat to humanity, because human beings want to live. In an animalistic state, there's one thing that's stronger than me that wants to use me to survive. But then what else is happening? All of that other stuff is as much of a threat. When you talk about the 1% and the 99%, and I'm assuming, I don't know this for sure, but to the 1%, there's a possibility that 99%, almost like Marxism, could be a threat to them if they ever decided to be. There was like a revolution of some sort.
Yeah.
That was the idea, class revolution, more so than just race or politics or anything else. It was what would happen if the 99% decided to rise up against the 1%.
Which is pretty much where we're at right now.
It is not necessarily in a practical, like they're not vampires and crawling up the walls like in issue 6, but it is certainly now people have a more fractured way. Some people think the fight should be one way. Some people think the fight should be another way. But then I had the character Tevin or Seesaw in the book that was like, we don't really need, what we need is to get rid of all of this and sort of just be free. But there's a degree of idealism even in that as well, because as long as you have people or even undead people, they're going to be systems. There's going to be a way of looking at what the world is. We're going to create a God. There are going to be people who say we need hierarchies, so I wanted all of that to be part of Philadelphia.
Well, I mean, that's what makes the book good. There's so much going on. And I think, look, I love vampire stories, and I've read so many different vampire books, everything from like Robert McCammon's Day Thirst to Anne Rice, the Vampire Chronicles. I mean,
the Delicate Dependency.
Yeah.
A bunch of them. Yeah.
I read a book called The World on Blood by Jonathan Nassau about vampires that are going to a blood, a blood anonymous group. And there's so many different ways to do it. But what makes it interesting is the surrounding milieu that you've given it. Like you said, so often vampire stories about vampires drinking blood. I mean, they have to achieve their sustenance. But like you said, it's just food. So to have a whole philosophy, if vampires have that part of their lives sorted, what does it mean to be immortal? Like, what does it mean to be able to look back at your own historical legacy, even though you've become what you've become? How does all that work? And I think that's what keeps readers coming back again and again and again. Are there, moving forward, is where the world is at right now, where we're at in America, has that informed your writing to the point where you've maybe changed things up over the last year as you've been writing the book? And where are you going to take it in terms of some themes that you would like to tackle moving forward?
The biggest thing is not taking a side. I didn't want this to be the Democrat or the Republican book. I didn't want to insert my personal politics into the book. I don't want to take a side.
Is that hard to do?
No, not because I constantly do that. I do that in my TV career. It's I don't think I've ever done anything in television that was purely me. It's usually been maybe a joke here or a storyline or something, but it usually is influenced by, when you write a TV script, it's not like it's just pure untouched. You've got producers you've got to answer to. You've got a network that you have to answer to.
Yeah.
You've got a director that influences, and then you've got actors that influence. It's like you got a lot of, if you're salmon trying to make it upstream, if you're a script, you've got a lot of bears that you got to kind of watch out for that are trying to take you apart. So, here it's one of those things where I'm just looking at how can I tell the most honest version of this story? How can I there's what we see on TV in regards to politics and stuff, and some of it's real, some of it's propaganda, some of it is, you don't know which is which sometimes. If you watch one channel, if I'm a conservative, I'm probably going to watch Fox. If I'm liberal, I'm going to watch MSNBC. And they're going to say things to me that I want to hear, and I'm going to get excited over that. It's almost like I'm being marketed to.
Right.
And I didn't want to market this to anybody except for people who like vampires. There's that crowd. And then under that, I wanted to touch on humanity. I wanted to be able to speak to who are we as people, and what's the connective tissue, not just about race, not just about politics, not just about class, but what is the thing that binds us as human beings? What do we care about? And that ultimately comes down to emotions and emotional states. Like when I talk about love and hate and anger and trauma and all of those different things, all of those different aspects of life, those are omnipresent no matter what group you're dealing with, no matter where you come from or genetically, gender, sexual orientation, whatever. We all have emotions and we all have feelings because we're all people. And I wanted that to sort of be the place that I start from. Because once you're a vampire, do you belong to a group anymore other than being a vampire? It's like if I'm a vampire and I'm black, do I say I'm a black vampire? I'm standing up for all the black vampires.
Am I William Marshall?
Right. I'm not going to drink white blood, or I'm not going to drink. Wait a minute. I can't drink black blood because that's my brother. Dude, it's like, am I of that state of mind, or am I just a vampire?
Well, Rodney,
So,
I don't mean to cut you off, because I wish you and I could go to a bar. I could talk to you for hours. Clearly,
well, you got me at the Hammer film stuff. Once you got that, and you got into the details about Coldcat and the Seattle thing. Then we could talk for days.
Oh yeah,
I don't want to do anything else.
I just have to. I got to say that you have been an incredible guest, but our time together is up. And
oh my God.
Over
already.
To have been on a fly on a wall of this particular panel has been just the delight of the entire con. I mean, the chats have been exploding. You probably sold 50,000 new issues of Philadelphia, and probably got about 1 million new.
Wait a minute. What am I going to do with those 50,000? I don't know if Image prints that many. Oh, they probably wouldn't like me saying it. But yeah.
This was just a fantastic conversation, and it's been my honor to get to know you, and maybe hopefully outside of this milieu we'll meet one day, because I could sit down and talk to you for hours.
I got to come to Baltimore. I missed my hometown, man. Come on. I don't know if Phillips is still there. It might be gone now, but yeah, I miss Maryland in general.
It'll be here in 2021.
Well, there you go.
I have to jump onto another panel. So
we're just going to dive right into it, Rob. If that's cool with you, Rodney. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
An absolute treat.
Fantastic. I'll talk to you guys soon.
So good. Philadelphia, best title ever. Don't let anyone tell you any different.
Well, Rob, you ready to dive into the fourth world?
I got to tell you, I can't believe you guys. I mean, this is the fourth event I've done panels for you guys.
You are our number one unpaid intern, let me tell you.
I have to tell you, the people that you line up for me to talk to is an amazing